Imagine a bone-chilling Chicago winter night. A 7-year-old boy huddled on a city sidewalk, shivering under a threadbare blanket, his breath fogging in the icy air. His small form is nearly lost in the shadows of towering buildings. Then, headlights pierce the darkness. A millionaire in a gleaming SUV spots him, slams on the brakes, and leaps out, his voice booming through the frost. "What are you doing out here? What could force a child to sleep in the freezing cold? Why would a wealthy stranger, hardened by success, risk everything to intervene?" This is a story of desperation, compassion, and a single moment that rewrites lives. You're about to dive into a tale so raw, so emotional, it'll grip your heart and leave you breathless. Join us for the unforgettable journey of Ethan, Marcus Bennett, and an act of courage that defies all odds. Hit play and let's unravel a story that'll warm your soul. Hey everyone! Welcome back to the channel, where we unearth stories that touch your soul, spark hope, and celebrate the power of human kindness. If you're new here, smash that subscribe button and join our vibrant community of story lovers. We're beyond thrilled to have you. Today, we're diving into a tale that feels like it's ripped from a Hollywood blockbuster, but it's real, raw, and profoundly moving. It's about Ethan, a 7-year-old boy facing a harsh world alone. Marcus Bennett, a millionaire with a heart guarded by walls of success, and a moment that changed their lives forever. This isn't just about wealth or hardship. It's about compassion, redemption, and the strength to rewrite a broken story in an instant. Let's meet Marcus Bennett. At 48, he's a real estate magnate in Chicago, a titan whose name is etched on luxury condos, towering skyscrapers, and exclusive lakefront properties. Worth over $150 million, Marcus lives in a Lakeshore Drive penthouse that's a masterpiece of modern design. Floor-to-ceiling windows showcasing Lake Michigan's shimmering expanse, sleek modern art adorning the walls. A private rooftop terrace with a fire pit, and a garage housing a collection of vintage cars worth millions. His life is a portrait of success, tailored suits from Milan, private dinners with Chicago's elite, and a reputation for being sharp, driven, and untouchable. But behind the polished exterior, Marcus is a loner. Divorced a decade ago, with no children, he's poured his heart into his empire, keeping relationships at arm's length. His staff, drivers, assistants, housekeepers run his life like a well-oiled machine, but he barely knows their names, their faces fading into the background of his meticulously ordered world. Now, let's meet Ethan. He's a 7-year-old with tousled brown hair, big green eyes that hold a quiet resilience, and a smile that hides a world of pain. Ethan lives with his father, David, in a run-down apartment on Chicago's South Side, a neighborhood where hope is a rare commodity. The apartment is a cramped, drafty space, its walls stained, its heat flickering on and off. David, a single father, was once a proud construction worker, but a layoff 2 years ago sent him spiraling into depression and alcohol. Ethan's mother left when he was a baby, leaving David as his only anchor, but that anchor is fraying. Ethan spends his days dodging trouble in a neighborhood where gangs lurk on corners and sirens wail at night. His nights are often spent hungry, clutching a worn stuffed dog named Rusty, his only companion in a world that feels too big and too cold. David's part-time janitorial job at one of Marcus's office buildings, a sleek glass tower downtown, is his only income, but it's barely enough to cover rent, let alone food or heat. Ethan sometimes tags along when David works late, sitting in a storage room with a tattered library book or a broken toy, unnoticed by the bustling world of executives and cleaners. Marcus, who rarely visits his properties, has never seen Ethan, never noticed the small boy in the oversized jacket, his sneakers worn thin. To Marcus, David is just a name on a payroll, a faceless employee among dozens. But Ethan isn't invisible to everyone. Sarah, a receptionist at the office building, notices him, how he's too quiet for a 7-year-old, how his clothes hang off his thin frame, how his eyes light up when she sneaks him a candy bar or a warm muffin from the break room. She senses something's wrong, his hunger, his wariness, but doesn't know the full story. Marcus, consumed by his empire, is oblivious to Ethan's existence, let alone his struggles. That is, until one freezing night, a moment that will shatter his carefully constructed world and force him to confront a reality he never imagined. Let's dive into the problem that set the stage for this life-altering encounter. Ethan's life was a daily battle against a world too big for his small shoulders. At 7, he should have been building blanket forts, racing bikes with friends, or dreaming of pirate adventures. Instead, he was surviving, navigating a life where fear and hunger were constant companions. David, his father, was a broken man. Once a proud construction worker who'd carry Ethan on his shoulders and tell him stories of building skyscrapers, David was laid off 2 years ago, a blow that crushed his spirit. Depression took hold, and alcohol became his escape, turning a loving father into a shadow who could barely care for himself, let alone his son. Their apartment, a cramped one-bedroom on Chicago's South Side, was a place of bare walls, flickering heat, and unpaid bills piling up like a storm waiting to break. The neighborhood was unforgiving, gangs on street corners, sirens piercing the night, and Ethan learned to stay quiet, to blend into the shadows, to avoid trouble at all costs. David's janitorial job at Marcus's office building, a gleaming tower of glass and steel, was a fragile lifeline, but the pay was meager, barely covering rent. Food was scarce, and Ethan's meals were often just scraps, a stale sandwich from a corner store, a half-eaten apple, or whatever Sarah, the receptionist, could slip him. When David worked late, Ethan would tag along, sitting in a storage room off the lobby, clutching Rusty, his stuffed dog, and reading tattered library books about dragons and faraway lands. He'd draw on scrap paper, sketching Rusty as a brave knight, escaping the reality of hunger and cold. Sarah took a shine to him, noticing his thin frame, his faded clothes, the way he'd flinch when David's voice grew sharp or a door slammed too loudly. She'd sneak him snacks, a candy bar, a bag of chips, tell him silly jokes, and try to coax a smile, but she suspected more was wrong. David's drinking was worsening, his temper fraying, and Ethan was paying the price: neglect, hunger, and nights spent alone in a world that offered no safety. Marcus, meanwhile, lived in a different universe. His Lakeshore Drive penthouse was a fortress of solitude, its sleek design a testament to his wealth, but not his warmth. He was a man of discipline, his life a carefully choreographed dance of meetings, deals, and deadlines. His divorce a decade ago had left him wary of connection, his heart guarded by the walls of his empire. Marcus had built Reed Innovations from a small real estate firm to a powerhouse, his focus on profit and prestige. His staff, dozens of employees across his properties, were cogs in his machine, their personal lives irrelevant to him. When his property manager mentioned David's inconsistent work, late arrivals, slurred speech, missed shifts, Marcus was detached, his response curt: "Replace him if he's a problem." His mind was on a $50 million deal, not a janitor's struggles or the boy who tagged along. But Ethan's situation was growing dire. David's drinking led to missed rent payments, threats of eviction, and nights when Ethan was left to wander the streets, seeking warmth in doorways or alleys. He'd curl up with Rusty, his blanket too thin to fight the Chicago cold, whispering to his stuffed dog as if it could keep him safe. The breaking point came on a bitter January night, with temperatures plunging below zero, the wind slicing through the city like a blade. David, drunk and overwhelmed after a fight over bills, locked Ethan out, shouting for him to stay out until he calmed down. Ethan, in a thin jacket and worn sneakers, had nowhere to go. He wandered to the sidewalk near Marcus's office building, a familiar place, and curled up under a tattered blanket, shivering, clutching Rusty, his small body trembling against the frost. That night, Marcus was driving home from a late meeting, his sleek black SUV gliding through the snowy streets. His mind was on a merger, his phone buzzing with emails, when his headlights caught a small figure huddled on the pavement near his building. He slammed on the brakes, his heart lurching, and jumped out, yelling, "What are you doing out here?" His voice was sharp, a mix of shock and instinct, but as he approached, His anger melted into horror. Ethan's green eyes met his, wide with fear, but flickering with a desperate hope. Marcus knelt beside him, his tailored coat brushing the snowy ground, and saw a child on the brink, freezing, alone, and terrified. Who was this boy? And how had he ended up here under Marcus's own building? Let's go back to understand how this moment unfolded and what Marcus did next to change everything. To grasp the full weight of that moment, we need to rewind to Ethan's life before that freezing January night. He was born to David and a mother who left when he was a baby, her absence a shadow Ethan barely understood, but felt deeply. David had been a devoted father in Ethan's early years, a construction worker who'd come home dusty but proud, hoisting Ethan onto his shoulders and spinning him around, telling stories of building Chicago's skyline. But a layoff 2 years ago shattered David's pride. The loss of his job, coupled with mounting bills, sent him into a spiral of depression. Alcohol became his refuge, a way to numb the pain of failure, but it turned him into a stranger, gruff, distant, and sometimes cruel. Their apartment, a cramped one-bedroom on the south side, became a place of bare walls and broken promises, where Ethan learned to tiptoe around David's moods, to stay quiet to avoid his father's anger. Ethan was a quiet kid, his green eyes bright with a curiosity that life hadn't yet extinguished. He loved books, tattered ones from the library about pirates, dragons, and faraway lands, where he could escape into worlds where heroes always won. He'd draw on any scrap of paper he could find, sketching Rusty, his stuffed dog, as a brave knight or a fearless explorer, creating adventures where hunger and fear didn't exist. But in reality, those were his constant companions. David's drinking meant missed meals, sometimes just a slice of stale bread or a can of soda from a corner store. The apartment's heat was unreliable, and Ethan would shiver under thin blankets, clutching Rusty for warmth. The South Side was a tough place, with gangs on corners and sirens at night, and Ethan learned to stay small, to avoid eye contact, to blend into the shadows to stay safe. When David worked late at Marcus's office building, a sleek tower of glass and steel that stood in stark contrast to their crumbling apartment, Ethan would tag along, sitting in a storage room off the lobby. He'd curl up with Rusty, reading a worn copy of The Hobbit or drawing on scrap paper, his small world confined to a corner of brooms and cleaning supplies. Sarah, the receptionist, became his quiet ally. A kind woman in her 30s, she noticed Ethan's thin frame, his oversized clothes, the way his eyes lit up at a candy bar or a warm muffin from the break room. She'd tell him silly jokes about dragons who forgot how to fly, or let him doodle on her notepad, hoping to coax a smile. But she saw the signs of neglect, his hunger, his wariness, the way he'd flinch when David's voice carried from the hallway. She'd tried asking David about Ethan's home life, but he'd snap, "He's fine," his tone shutting her down. Sarah didn't push, afraid of making things worse, but she kept a close eye, slipping Ethan snacks and watching for any chance to help. Marcus, meanwhile, was a man of precision, his life a carefully orchestrated empire. His divorce a decade ago had left him wary of connection, his heart guarded by the walls of his success. He'd built Reed Innovations from a small real estate firm to a powerhouse, buying and developing properties that shaped Chicago's skyline. His Lakeshore Drive penthouse was a showcase of wealth, modern art, marble floors, a rooftop terrace with views of Lake Michigan, but it was a lonely place, filled with the hum of staff but no real warmth. Marcus rarely visited his properties, leaving management to his team. David struggles. Ethan's presence, none of it registered. When his property manager mentioned David's issues, tardiness, signs of drinking, Marcus was detached, his response cold, "Handle it." His mind was on a $50 million merger, not a janitor or the boy who tagged along. But Ethan's world was crumbling faster than anyone knew. David's drinking led to missed rent, threats of eviction, and nights when Ethan was pushed out, left to wander the streets. He'd find shelter in alleys or doorways, clutching Rusty, whispering to him as if he could keep the cold at bay. That January night, after a drunken outburst over unpaid bills, David locked Ethan out, shouting for him to stay out until he calmed down. Ethan, in a thin jacket and worn sneakers, wandered to the sidewalk near Marcus's office building, a familiar place where he felt a flicker of safety. He curled up under a tattered blanket, his body shaking, his breath fogging in the sub-zero air, Rusty clutched tightly against his chest. When Marcus's SUV glided through the snowy streets, his headlights caught Ethan's small form. He slammed on the brakes, his heart lurching, and jumped out, yelling, "What are you doing out here?" But as he approached, his anger melted into shock. Ethan's green eyes met his, wide with fear but holding a desperate spark of hope. Marcus knelt beside him, his tailored coat brushing the snowy ground, his voice softening. "Who are you, kid?" Sarah, working late, saw the scene and rushed out, explaining what she knew about Ethan and David's struggles. Marcus's heart clenched. He didn't know this boy, but he knew he couldn't leave him in the cold. Marcus acted swiftly. He called his lawyer, a trusted friend who specialized in family law, and arranged for a social worker to assess Ethan that night, ensuring he was taken to a warm, safe place. He confronted David, who broke down, admitting his drinking and neglect, begging not to lose his job. Marcus, torn between anger and pity, offered to fund David's rehab but insisted Ethan be protected immediately, his safety non-negotiable. That moment on the sidewalk was a seismic shift. Ethan's shivering form, his desperate grip on Rusty, shattered Marcus's carefully built walls. He saw a child on the brink, freezing, alone, and terrified, and he couldn't walk away. With Sarah's help, Marcus learned the full extent of Ethan's suffering, David's drinking, the neglect, the nights Ethan spent hungry or wandering the streets. Marcus arranged for a social worker to take Ethan to a safe, warm foster home that night, ensuring he was cared for while David entered a rehab program Marcus funded. But Marcus didn't stop there. He hired a private investigator to document David's neglect, ensuring accountability while giving him a chance to recover. He visited Ethan in foster care, bringing books about dragons and a new sketch pad, learning his love for stories and drawing. "You're safe now," he promised, kneeling to meet Ethan's green eyes, which flickered with wary hope. Ethan, hesitant but sensing Marcus's sincerity, began to trust him. Marcus petitioned to become Ethan's legal guardian, determined to give him a stable home. The court, seeing his commitment and resources, approved, and Ethan moved into the penthouse, his small presence filling its silent spaces with life. Ethan's story is more than a millionaire's rescue. It's a testament to the power of one moment to change a life. Marcus didn't just save Ethan. He found purpose in the boy's resilience, a reason to open his heart. He became Ethan's guardian, transforming his penthouse into a home filled with warmth, laughter, and dragon stories. David, now sober, visits regularly, rebuilding his bond with Ethan under Marcus's supportive watch. Marcus, once a loner, is now a father figure, reading bedtime stories, framing Ethan's drawings, and marveling at his courage. Today, Ethan is a thriving 8-year-old, his laughter echoing through the penthouse, his sketches covering the walls. Marcus founded a charity for neglected children, inspired by Ethan's strength, funding shelters and programs to break cycles of hardship. This story shows that compassion can rewrite futures, that one act of kindness can heal a child's wounds and transform a heart. If Ethan and Marcus's story touched your heart, smash that like button and share it with someone who needs a spark of hope. Subscribe and ring the bell for more stories that inspire and uplift. Drop a comment. Have you ever witnessed an act of kindness that changed a life? We'd love to hear your story. Let's spread compassion together. See you in the next video.